This is the lecture on school counselors as educational leaders. Where we're going to talk through several different things regarding leadership, and then we will do some activities related to the material that we're going to talk about and when we are in class together. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to look at this slide here that talks about the new vision of school counseling. So this is putting side by side and comparing some traditional roles of school counselors to the new vision. And when we talk about the new vision, we're talking about the transforming school counseling movement and some recognition that there are things that we need to change in what we're doing and how we're doing that. Um, look through these things, look for some things that are similar, look for what you see that kind of leads you to interpret things as a different focus. And we'll talk about these a little bit more in class. But I want you to just look at that I'm going to give you a minute to take a look at that. And then, like I said, in class we're gonna talk about this slide in particular. So you may want to bring your PowerPoint with you. Okay, we've talked last week a little bit about the Texas model. Now we're going to talk about the national model. The national model and the Texas model are similar. The main difference is that the national model there's 4 elements to it, and the fourth area that you look at in this is accountability, and it's talking about accountability on the part of the school counselor. So let's look briefly at each of these, and we'll go into these in more detail. But the first element is the program foundation. Just like anything else that you're doing, you have to have the foundation for the work. That you don't build a house until you build the foundation, and you shouldn't build your counseling program until you build the foundation of it. And that includes some commonly agreed upon principles and philosophies about the school counseling program, about how we work with students, about roles and responsibilities. That it takes some self-examination of what our beliefs and value systems are in that. And then this is the point of the program where you would develop a mission statement. And we'll talk about mission statements in the course as well, where we look at how your school counseling mission statement should align with your school, which should align with your district, which should align with the state. Similar to the Texas model, it has the 3 domains. You have the academic, career, personal, or social. And remember, that's CAPS. That's what we're looking at that. Okay, the next is the delivery system. This is the same as the Texas model. This is where we get the RIGS. This is school guidance curriculum, where the other one is called guidance curriculum. So you've got guidance curriculum, your individual planning, responsive services, and system support. And then the third element is your management system. And that's how you go about managing all the different aspects of the program, about who all's involved in it, and how you make changes to it. And then accountability is related to the data that you collect. And there's accountability in 2 parts. One is you're accountable for student outcomes, but then also in that accountability is counselor job performance as well. So those are the 4 elements in the national model: the foundation, the delivery system, the management system, and the accountability system. The themes of the national model include leadership, advocacy, collaboration, teaming, and systemic change. And we'll be looking at each of these as we go along. Not all schools look at their school counselor as a leader, but when we look at the expectations of the position, it clearly indicates a need for leadership. And if you're going to be in a leadership position, you need to have leadership skills. The other part that you think about, if you're a leader, that means you're leading someone or something. And so that typically is indicates that there's a sense of a team on here. And that's the collaborative aspect of the work. And what we know is that the demands of school counseling, the needs of students mandate that we quit being private practitioners in our office, that we have to take a more collaborative approach to what we're doing. So these are some of the performance standards that you look at in the model, that these are the things that you should be able to do, and that what you should be held accountable for. So you can see this first part, the planning and organizing. You see the aspects of program management in there. Those all have to do with looking at your program, consulting with others as to what the needs are, putting together an advisory council that helps you to maintain your program and make decisions about your program, the ability to know how to collect data, what data to collect, and how to analyze that so that you can get information about your program, how to evaluate those results, the ability to do a program audit where you take a hard look at your program to look and see what are you doing well, what pieces are missing, and where need for improvement is. We should be advocating for students, for reform within the educational environment and equity. The counselor has to be the coordinator of all the counseling services and making sure that nothing is being left out. Obviously, responsive services, that's a main part of our job. And then system support. And in looking at that, that's the system support includes setting goals for the program, doing research to determine what are evidence-based practices, what's the best approach for your school to go about engaging in this work, and then development of your program. Something that lots of school counselors miss out on is public relations. And public relations can be something as simple as putting out a newsletter, having a website, being visible, but then it also is about tooting your own horn when things are going well, when you've had successes, making other people aware of it, and then serving on school and district level committees. These are some of the social issues that we look at that indicate why we can't continue in this traditional model of school counseling. That you look at the economic concerns, dealing with broken families, dealing with families who need access to community resources through whether that be federal programs, state programs, and then increasing violence in the schools and the communities. And I want to talk just a minute about that. We use the word bully a lot, and I certainly don't want to suggest that there's not bullying going on in the schools, but I don't think that there's bullying at the level that lots of people believe that is there. That if you look at what really is considered bullying, I'm not sure that that's what's going on. I do believe that we have developed a culture in many, many schools of disrespect, and people just being mean spirited and hateful. But I don't think those things are always the same as bullying. But those are the things that tend to cause lots of problems in the culture of the school. So I think we maybe need to educate students and parents about what truly is bullying and what really is just being disrespectful to one another. And that goes adult to student, student to student, student to adult. That goes all around. Some of these issues require us to be proactive. That if we can address some of these issues up front, that we can make a difference before they become bigger problems. Uh, we're expected to be involved in social justice leadership and advocacy, and so that's in looking at, do all students have equal access to academic programs, extracurricular activities, counseling services. We know that the environment affects behavior. And so, if we really want to address behavior, we have to address the environment. And that goes back to what I was saying before about this environment of disrespect. So, we know that we have a social, moral, and professional responsibility to address issues and do our best to eliminate anything in the environment that becomes an obstacle for a student, for any student. That includes looking at some of our policies and procedures and determining whether there may be a need for change there. But as a counselor, as a leader, we have to be assertive in advocating for changes and making sure that our voice is being heard. Part of this slide is not showing up. I don't know why it's not showing up. This is odd. There it is. Okay. I want to read you a story. This is called The Waterfall Story. And it's one of my favorite stories that I think really illustrates what's going on with school counselors. And this is out of the book, School Counselors as Educational Leaders. Several pages in, or several places in here you'll see page numbers, and they're referring to this book, and I'll have this stuff when we're in class. Okay. Many practicing school counselors have heard the story of the babies and the waterfall, frequently told by Pat Martin when she was a senior specialist at the Education Trust, focusing her efforts on transforming school counseling initiative. The story is a metaphor for the process of transforming school counseling. As the author remembers, it went something like this. Early in Pat's career as a school counselor, she likened her work to standing at the bottom of a waterfall over which many babies were falling. They were falling all over the place in the pool below the waterfall, to the right and left of her, in front of her, and behind her. Pat imagined herself doing her best to catch as many babies as possible, and she sincerely wanted to save every one of them. She worked very hard at saving babies, but there were so many babies falling that she could not keep up with the need. It was not long before Pat realized that she could catch only so many babies. She was losing many babies, and she was exhausted from saving the few she could catch. Pat did not give up, but she realized that she needed to approach the problem from a different perspective. She decided to devote her efforts to organizing a group of concerned individuals and leading them to the top of the waterfall where they would construct a safety net that would prevent the babies from falling over in the first place. Many school counselors strongly relate to this story. They feel passion for their work and have a commitment to the children and families they serve. They also experience the exhaustion and futility of trying to save one child at a time when so many need attention. Nevertheless, some school counselors believe it is their noble calling to catch the babies at the bottom of the waterfall. They work hard to make a difference in the lives of the children they encounter and are appreciated for what they do. Meanwhile, however, all around them, other children who have not come to their attention or who must wait for an intervention may be losing ground in their struggle to succeed personally, academically, and practically. So I think that that's a perfect example of showing us why the traditional model doesn't work and why our role needs to be in a leadership capacity to advocate, to collaborate for others, and to really be the ones that are the catalyst for system change. Some of the areas that we look at that show us that there's a need for change are looking at, and these are college graduation rates by age of 24. So you see a huge disparity here among different ethnic groups. That some students are going to school and graduating far more than others. We also know not only is it by ethnicity, but that by income, that lower income students attend college at a much lower rate than high income students. And, we want to say, well, they can't afford to go. And where that's true from a personal standpoint, there's far more financial aid opportunities for those students than there are for students in higher income brackets. Many of them, there's opportunities that they basically could go to school for free. And if you examine, and this will be one of the activities we do in class, we're going to examine our AEIS report and look at the differences in math and reading achievement levels across different subpopulations and to see where the disparity is on your own campus. Another thing that's pointing to us is some of the things that are going on in the workforce. Right now, 70% of the fastest growing jobs require education beyond high school. The high school diploma would not be adequate for those positions. 40% of all new jobs require at least an associate's degree. And if they examine the numbers between 1990 and 2008, the number of college level job openings barely kept up with, or the number of college graduates barely kept up with the need in the work environment. And, right now we hear lots of stuff about unemployment or about students graduating and not being able to get a job. That makes you think that those jobs aren't out there. Well, the jobs are out there. It depends upon what the workforce demands are. So if you're graduating with a degree in business, it's very likely you may not find a job. But if you're graduating with a degree in engineering, it's a whole different picture for you. Even within the educational environment, if you look at students who graduate with certification to be an English teacher, there's lots of English teachers out there, but there's a huge demand for physics teachers. So part of our job as a counselor is to help students understand what the demand will be. This may be the job that sounds great to you, but will there be a job available once you graduate? When I was a high school counselor in Houston, I'd gone to a couple of different presentations. One was at the University of Houston, and they were talking about their architecture program, and they said that the number of jobs in architecture were very limited, and it was about 1 out of every 4 of their graduates was able to get a job because there just wasn't a high demand for the position. On the other side of that, we went to a program at MD Anderson where the human resources people talked to us about the types of demands that they had for hiring. And they were telling us that at the time, and this was probably it was probably right about the year 2000, that there was such a demand for pharmacists that they could have a pharmacist come in and apply for a job with them, and the pharmacist had the ability to say, I want to work on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 2, and this is how much money I want to make. And they would meet their demands and hire them because they could not get enough pharmacists to work. So that's part of our role is helping students to understand, not only what job is a good fit for you, but will there be a job available to you once you graduate? I think most of us would agree that the educational system needs some huge overhaul. But if we are really going to make change, it begins one campus at a time. And you focus on what you can focus on your campus. For those of you who may end up serving on a campus that has multiple counselors, if your entire counseling team is not on board with changes, then you change what you can change within your purview. And you do what you know you need to be doing. So if nobody else is doing classroom guidance lessons, you become the one that offers that to teachers. And if nobody else is doing 4-year plans with their students, you're the one that does the 4-year plans with your students. You determine how you work with your students. So not only should we be looking at what we can do within on our own campus, but we need to be active in advocating at the state and national level for legislature. Any of you guys who've been to Austin with me, I think you understand the need to be involved in this, and the need to join with a greater group, such as Texas Counseling Association, in order to really create a significant enough group that the voice is being heard. And then we need to herald the successes that we have had. We had a very successful legislative session from TCA this past session, and there were lots and lots of places that we were talking about what we were able to get done. I like this quote from Cobia and Henderson. Professional school counselors spend most of each workday developing and maintaining relationships with students, teachers, parents, administrators, and community resource persons. School counselors have unique skills, abilities, and knowledge that enables them to know in which situations to provide leadership and in which situations to support the emergence of leadership in others. And this is how we do our work. We know with our clients when we might need to be a little bit more directive, when we might need to probe a little bit more, and when we just need to sit back and let somebody talk through something and come to a conclusion on their own. That's just built in our ability in our skills for analyzing a situation. So we have this call for leadership, but what we know is that there are not very many school counseling programs in which you really receive formal training in leadership. It would be fabulous if we could add a couple of classes in. I have my principal certification, and so I have some of those classes and realize how that could benefit you. But unfortunately, most of you don't want to add hours to your degree, and I do understand that. Even though we don't have the formal training, we are often volunteered for leadership positions. And so you're having to do that hands-on leadership as just on-the-job training and figuring out what you're doing. But it's important that you understand the framework of leadership skills and strategies and leadership theory. So we're going to talk about some of those things. So when you look at some of the skills that are necessary from a counseling standpoint, obviously you need to have knowledge and skills for program development, management, and evaluation. That's what you're doing. You need to be knowledgeable about how to assess the current needs, issues, resources, and opportunities within your campus. We're going to work on that. And then if you look at this list of skills, other than public relations, all of these other things are things that you are trained to do in your program. That you learn how to facilitate a group. You know how to engage in the collaboration process. You'll be trained in consultation, and we work on conflict resolution. So already there are lots of things that are in place for us as counselors and through the training that we have that are equipping us to leadership, whether we feel that we're competent in that area or not. You have received significant training that you can call upon. So let's start looking at some of the leadership theory. And these are the theories that we're going to look at. We've got situational leadership, transformational leadership, moral leadership, the learning organization model, servant leadership, empowerment leadership, and then an integrated model for school counselors. So situational leadership is just exactly what it sounds like, is that you determine what strategies and skills are necessary as a leader based upon the situation. So if you are working with a brand new teacher, this is her first year of teaching, you might provide different support to her than you would a teacher who's been there for 10 years. If you have a teacher that, regardless of how long they've been there, is very good at classroom management stuff, then you wouldn't need to really be engaged with that person as much as maybe a teacher that there are frequent behavioral referrals out of their classroom. So you have the ability to assess the situation and determine what is the appropriate level of intervention on your part. Part of that also is to assess the person that you're working with or the group that you're working with, and are they ready to do whatever it is you're asking them to do. So let's say that you've written a guidance curriculum and you want the teachers to implement part of it. You're going to do some of the lessons, but you're going to get the teachers to do some of the lessons. You need to be sure that your teachers are equipped to teach the lessons that you're asking them to teach. Do they have the ability? Do they have the knowledge, the experience, and the skills? Are they willing to do it? What's their motivation? This type of leadership looks at two different aspects of, and you'll see this several places in several different theories, that it's task behavior. What are you asking them to do? When are you giving them time to do it? When do you want it done by? How are they to accomplish this task? Or relationship behavior, that you're looking at being supportive and facilitative in nature, but non-directive. So these are two approaches that either you do them when it's the situation is appropriate, or this may be your leadership style anyway. But the situational leader knows, do I need to just have them engage in accomplishing this task, or do I need to be concerned about the relationship that's going on here? Okay, transformational leadership comes out of Deming's total quality management leadership. Total quality management came about, gosh, I want to say like maybe the late night or in late 1980s, 1990s, something like that. I don't remember the date exactly. But in that, a lot of the focus was on processing how we work together as a team, or what this was like for you, what this activity was like for you. So you would include activities of teaching and learning. You'd be concerned with the classroom climate, with the curriculum, with the relationships within the people that are doing the work here. And the idea behind this, I think there were total quality schools. That there was a theory that you could set your school up with this theory, and it could be the total quality schools. But the idea is that when you have high quality relationships, that you get high quality outcomes. And if you work with adolescents at all, I think you know that for kids who don't have a relationship with their teacher, they tend, if they're not intrinsically motivated, those are the classes that students may not perform in. I used to get so frustrated with my high school students that I would say, why don't you do your homework? And they would say, I don't like my teacher. Well, that's not the point. The teacher's going to be there whether next year, whether you are or not. But not doing your homework, you're going to be there with her again. So there's 14 points of this total quality management, and I'm going to read through them. It's you create constancy of purpose for the improvement of product and service. You adopt the new philosophy. You cease dependence on mass inspection. You end the practice of awarding the business on the price tag alone. Constantly improve the system of production and service. Institute training, institute leadership, drive out fear, break down barriers between staff areas, eliminate slogans, exhortations, and targets for the workforce, eliminate numerical quotas, remove barriers to pride of workmanship, institute a vigorous education and retraining program, and take action to accomplish the transformation. So you can see that a lot of these really do sound business-like, but that there is application for them in the school environment. Okay, so the next transformational leadership model is you look at as a leader, you're demonstrating your leadership is based upon a full expression of yourself. So it's a very transparent model. It's kind of a what you see is what you get model, that there's no hidden agendas, there's no putting on, certain personas because you believe that that's what people expect of you as a leader. That it's a very authentic expression of leadership. And there's three key elements to it. One is that you have ideas for change, that you look at the quality of relationships and relationships that are harmonious, open, empowering, and inclusive, and that there's a sense of adventure in what you're doing, so that you're curious about things, or you like a challenge, or you're willing to take an appropriate level of risk. Um, in this model, it talks about visionary leadership, and that you're able to look at what's best in the long term, but make it look good in the short term as you're working toward your long term goal. It's a clean and neat and nice expression of achievement of short term goals. Every time I look at this, I can't help but think about my cooking style. I like to cook. I'm a pretty good cook, but my kitchen can be a disaster when I'm through cooking. So although my end product looks really good, it's very messy in getting there. That would not be the example of this type of leadership, this transformational leadership. At the times when I am more prepared and I take the time to get myself more prepared before I start cooking, and I clean up along the way as I'm going, then once I'm done, it's not quite as overwhelming. And so this visionary leadership has the ability to make this a smooth and neat, nice and neat process. And you don't have that sense when you're done that you've kind of been run through the ringer. Okay, this looks at 4 leadership qualities within a transformational leader. That you have a guiding vision, not only of what you want to do professionally, but personally as well. That there's a passion in the work that you're doing and how you go about doing it. It's all based upon a sense of integrity, that this candor. Again, that to me, that's the authentic, being genuine in the process. That there's a sense that they're mature leaders, and that they know how to establish trust among the people that they're working with. Transformational leaders are curious and daring. They don't mind taking a risk. You have to learn character and vision along the way. This model talks about the difference between managers and leaders. And managers administer and imitate. They imitate the work of others, where leaders innovate and originate. That they're doing their own thing. They're not picking up what worked for somebody else and trying to make it work for them. Okay, the lessons of self-knowledge, and this would be true for the leader as well as for the people that they're working with, that they recognize that typically we're our own best teacher, that we're willing to accept responsibility, that it's this philosophy that you can learn just about whatever you set your mind to learning, and that once you've had this experience, that you need to take the time to reflect on it, and that gives you a deeper level of understanding of the process that you've been through and the work that you've done. The idea here is that the unexamined life is impossible to live successfully. If we just go about our task and we accomplish things and we don't take the time to reflect upon it, it's most likely going to be difficult to replicate success in other areas. They believe that effective leaders take a whole brain approach to leading and listen to their inner voice, and that they have a sense of the future, but they also have patience in making these long-term plans. That they recognize that change is a process and that it can't happen overnight, and that they're patient in letting the process occur. So the next leadership theory is moral leadership, and this was Sir Giovanni is the author of this theory. I can tell you that the school where I was, the high school where I was in Houston, were big Sir Giovanni disciples, and these were things that we taught our students. We talked to our students about habits of the heart, the head, and the hand. And so when you look at how these things work together, so the heart is it's our philosophical beliefs, our values, those things that we hold at the core of who we are. The head is this mental picture of how things work around us, and then the hand is the decisions that we make, the actions that we take, and the behaviors that we engage in as a result. So when we talk about connecting these things and coming up with some common understanding, it works to build a sense of community. And in moral leadership, they see leadership as a behavior and also as a sense of stewardship, that you have something that's been entrusted to you, and that you're a good steward of working with that which has been entrusted to you. Um, they This leadership theory, there's not a lot of direct leadership. Instead, you look at the learning community's norms and the associated work with it. You develop a sense of collegiality. You help people to find intrinsic motivation for the work that you're doing. If you're not intrinsically motivated to do it, you're most likely not committed to it as well. And then that you're committed to striving toward that ideal professional, that that we have a vision of what this should look like and how, and we strive to continue to strive to get there. So in this theory, leadership is based upon professional and moral authority, and there's a balance between process and substance. We're not just focusing on the relationships and how people are working together. We're not just focusing on the end product, but there's a balance, and we find that both are important. These are the 5 characteristics of virtuous schools, which this is part of Sir Giovanni's work, that it believes that it must be a learning community with teachers, counselors, and administrators who are all servant leaders, that we believe that every child can learn, and that everyone in the learning community is committed to that you seek to serve the whole student, that you honor respect, and that it's a partnership between the school, the community, teachers, and parents. The learning organization model was based on the book The Fifth Discipline by Senge. This is also one of the models that we used at our high school. It's five. This believes that there are 5 disciplines that help us to overcome organizational learning disabilities, so that as an organization, when we are not functioning well, that if we focus on these things, that it will improve the quality of the organization. Personal mastery, so that looks at your competence, your skills, spiritual growth, creativity in viewing life, personal vision of one's purpose. And if you look at the spiritual growth, that really is that is not necessarily a religious sense. It is that sense of purpose. That what's the sense of purpose of where we are. That you focus on the mental models, and there's dialogue about the images that we have of how the world works, and that you find within your team we don't all see it in the same way. And so when you look at how other people are looking at things and what their internal images look like, it facilitates coming together to accomplish a shared vision. That there's team learning, that the group functions as a whole, and you use the synergy that's related to the group to accomplish things that are greater than any one person in the group could do on their own, or the sum of the individuals within the group. And then you look at the systems thinking, and this is similar to family therapy things, that you're looking at how is the system functioning, where do we interact, how do we interact, where's the integration of the work that we're doing. And this can be from a curriculum standpoint, but it can also be from a standpoint of cliques within your faculty, cliques within your parents, within your students, and looking at how all of those things work together. And that we recognize that whether we like it or not, we're all connected, and we're all connected to this organization, and that we all have an impact on one another. So the servant leadership is based upon principle-centered leadership. Notice that's principle, P-L-E, not P-A-L. It's not the person, it's the ideas. That the idea is that as a leader, we serve first and lead second. That we believe in the human spirit and moral principles and have strong moral backing to what we do. And that the idea is that we build trust and nurture growth and development in others. So within this theory, leadership is developed from within, and it's practiced on 4 levels: interpersonal, how we get along with each other, how we are in relationship with others, the managerial responsibilities that we have, and then the organizational responsibilities. There are 8 principles of leadership. One is that we are continuing learning, that we care about others, that we're service oriented. We recognize that our role as a servant to the organization, that we have a positive outlook and radiate positive energy to others, that you believe in other people. This again has that sense of adventure and the willingness to take risk, and that you value the synergistic work, and that you engage in self-renewal and live balanced lives. It's that self-care that we teach as counselors. Okay, empowerment leadership theory looks at how the leader empowers other people, that you accept input from others, that you hear the voice of others, that you're willing to delegate some of the powers, and that you motivate others to individual success. That it's not all about you're in control and you're the one that's doing it all. Okay? It emphasizes the human need to be respected and acknowledged as a source of leadership. So the 5 practices within empowerment leadership are to challenge the process, inspire a shared vision among others, give others the ability to act and to have ownership in things, model what you want others to be doing, and then encourage the heart and encourage the hopes and dreams of others. So if we look at an integrated school counseling model, there is no school counseling leadership model. But if you can integrate what we know about counseling theory and about some of these leadership models. So we heard a lot about empowerment. That's a counseling idea. We've heard a lot about process, paying attention to the process. That's part of the counseling theory, and then the balance of things. So if you look back through these different theories, I think you're going to be able to highlight areas that relate to different counseling theories and how they overlap. And so in looking at marrying counseling theory with leadership theory, that provides us with this practical framework for how we engage in leadership activities as a school counselor. And then it helps you to translate from theory into practice. So those were leadership theory. Now we're going to look at leadership style. So the leadership style is just a behavior pattern of someone who has influence over others. That's what we're looking at. And you're going to see some of these same names here. So this is Bennis. It says no leader set out to be a leader. People set out to live their lives expressing themselves fully. When that expression is of value, they become leaders. To use yourself completely, all your gifts, skills, and energies in order to make your vision manifest. You must withhold nothing. You must, in sum, become the person you started out to be and to enjoy the process of becoming. So whether you want to be a leader or not, you're going to be pushed into it. in some of your roles in schools. So there's some different studies that were done in different states to look at leadership style, and you're going to see lots of overlap here. Basically, they're saying some of the same things, they're just giving it different labels. So the Iowa studies identified 3 basic behavioral styles. That is the autocratic style, and so that's very top down. That it's more militaristic, it's more drill sergeant. You don't care what other people think, and you don't delegate, you just tell them what they need to do. The democratic style, where you have shared leadership and decision making, and this was the model that our school in Houston worked under. And so the downfall to this is sometimes you got to step up and be the leader when things are floundering. You have to step up and provide the direction. And so with this style, sometimes that may be a difficult thing. And then the laissez-faire style, where there's little leadership or direction. And that sounds like a bad thing, but if you're working with a bunch of highly motivated, highly qualified individuals, they don't need much else. They need to be left alone and, given the ability to move forward and do what they know how to do. And there's some examples that we will talk about in class, and I'll bring that to class on Monday. Okay, the Ohio studies looked at 2 types of leadership behavior, so you're going to see some similarity here. So those that are task-oriented leaders or people-oriented leaders. So the task-oriented leader is attending to the structure of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and the people-oriented leaders are attending to the people. How are they doing? They're seeing, the consideration of others. So if you look at this Johari's window here, you have high levels of consideration with low structure, the combination of high structure and high consideration, low consideration and low structure, and high structure and low consideration. There's nothing in here that one of these is necessarily better than the other. I don't think any of us would ever really appreciate a lot of low consideration. But if you have groups that are working well together already, you may not need to engage in that. It may already be there. So they were able to take these models, these theories, and apply them in here and tell you where each one fit. Okay, the Michigan studies, again, you see some of the same thing here. 2 styles: employee orientation, that would be similar to the people orientation, or production, so that would be the task orientation. And basically, they're coming up with the same things that we saw in the Ohio study. And then they talked about where these were the leadership styles that seemed to emerge out of that study. So, as a leader, regardless of how good of a leader we are, we all have areas for improvement. And so there's this process of developing an improvement plan where maybe you do some assessments and some leadership assessments, and you identify where you think you need to improve as a leader. This is very similar to a treatment plan, to a behavior intervention plan. You define what the objectives are going to be. You're very specific in how you do it. What do you want to be able to do? You may need to select a mentor, and somebody that you feel like exhibits those traits that you're looking for or is good in the areas that you need strengthened. You're going to develop strategies on how you're going to achieve your objectives. Do you need training? Do you need to shadow people? And then how are you going to monitor your progress? How are you going to know if you're making improvement or not? And then what do you hope the outcomes will be? What do you hope will be different once you have implemented this plan? So for us, some of the leadership challenges that we look at is first begins the school counselor role definition, that we know that different schools define our roles differently, despite the fact that it's written out in law. In practice, we're defined differently. As we said before, you're not always prepared to be leaders. For some, you struggle with being open and honest enough to engage in the self-assessment and exploration process. The idea of deciding whether we're a generalist or a specialist. Are we a professional counselor who works in a school environment, or are we an educator with a counseling expertise? You guys have heard me talk about that before, that I don't think that we should be asking that question, because I think that we're both. What kind of technological competence do you have? I think it's really difficult to be a effective counselor right now if you're not good with technology. So that may be part of your leadership plan, is that you recognize you need to improve in your technology skills. And then continuous professional development, that you're continuing to grow as an individual. Okay, some of the systemic challenges that we have are being able to establish the programming and put it in place. That not all schools are able to do that. Looking at program delivery systems, how are we going about that? Large student to counselor ratios, and the ability and the time and the respect for the leadership, advocacy, and public relation work that we do. So these are some of the problems that you'll see that come up in a counseling program. That if you're lacking a basic philosophy, it's like building your house with a dirt floor. That if you don't have a basic philosophy that drives what you're doing, then there's nothing that draws it all together. Poor integration of the counseling program into the overall academic curriculum. Insufficient student access. We all know those schools where counselors are told you can see kids before or after school, during electives, during lunch, during PE, that your work with them is not seen as vital in improving academics as much as sitting in a classroom would be. We're not providing adequate services for some students in some schools. Okay, the next thing is inadequate services for some students, that maybe we're not meeting the needs of all students. The lack of counselor accountability, that nobody's asking how good are you at what you're doing and what you're doing and what are the outcomes you're achieving. And then failure to utilize other resources, that you're trying to do it yourself. So let's talk a little bit about advocacy. So the idea that these are some definitions of advocacy: the process of reducing the effects of environmental and institutional barriers that impede student success, a change-producing process that affects attitudes, policies, or practices in order to reduce problems or improve the meeting of human needs. But basically, if you boil all that down, it is just simply our efforts to produce equity for all students. So when we talk about equity, what is equity? Well, equity does not mean equal. Okay, and there are times that equity doesn't seem to be fair. Some students receive more services than other students because they need more than other students. So this equity, this sense of equity, is whatever it is that levels the playing field. So every student has an equal opportunity to be successful. One of my favorite quotes, I belong to the United Methodist Church, and John Wesley is the founder of the United Methodist Church. And his mother, there were 19 children in his family, and his mother was much revered for her efforts in child rearing. And somebody asked her at one point, "Do you love one of your children more than the other?" And she said, "Well, yes, I do." And they said, "Which one?" And she said, "Whichever one needs it at the time." So that's kind of our role, is to be the one that is there advocating for that level playing field. And For some, they need more to bring the playing field up to that level where others are. So as counselors, we should be advocating for our clients or students. We need to advocate for system change, and then we need to advocate for our profession. I did a presentation for the NISD counselor principals back in May, and was surprised at how many of them didn't really know what type of training their counselors have had and how they should be appropriately utilized. And so that's our job, is to advocate for that, and to to let people know we're pretty good at what we do, and this is what we've been trained to do, and this is where we can make a difference. So if you're looking at this idea of social change, remember we said earlier, environment plays a critical role in determining behavior. And so if you have a lack of social justice in your environment, if you have a lack of equity, we have a social, moral, and professional responsibility to address that. And we're uniquely trained to do that, that we're knowledgeable about the developmental needs of students, that we're knowledgeable about interpersonal relationships and system analysis and problem solving. So all of these things that we've been trained to do really provide the scaffolding to engage in this advocacy and leadership efforts. These are some of the skills of an effective advocate. Obviously, the ability to be flexible. You have to be willing to compromise. Sometimes you can't get everything you want, but if you can get part of what you want, if you can, you're maybe not able to accomplish the big change, but if you can accomplish a little change that's a step in the right direction, that's a good thing. That you have a strong understanding of yourself and others. You're willing to learn from the system, that you can set realistic goals, and that you work on developing yourself from within and building on your own personal strengths, and identifying what the target should be. If everything becomes a battle and you're fighting all the battles, then you lose part of your credibility. So to know what you need to do, to what you need to focus on in order to get the bigger bang for your buck sometimes. Okay, here's some steps to systemic change, and this is just a basic problem solving process. You identify the problem, the extent of it, but you make that decision based upon data, that you're not going out there and making those decisions based upon perception, that you have something to support what you're saying. Looking at what are the systemic problems or the systemic issues that are contributing to the problem. Assess whether this is the time to act. There are risks associated with action and risk associated with inaction, and what's the greater risk. Sometimes you maybe need to put some other things in place before you take action. Identify who your allies are, and get them on board through teaming and collaboration. Clarify the source and the focus of the problem, and then gather additional data to support the need to change. When you can present data to people that can't be argued, then you've got a much stronger platform from which to begin with. So then when you're looking at actually making the change, you create this action plan, and only take those actions that are realistic. Identify what needs to change and the strategies that you're going to use to change it. Get influential people and policymakers on board. And sometimes those influential people are just, you know who the teacher leaders are on your campus. And that if you can get those individuals aligned with you, that they're going to be able to have influence on people you wouldn't have influence on. Who's going to be the resistance? Where's going to be the resistance, and how are you going to deal with that? And then as you, along the way, you're evaluating your progress so that you can make revisions to the plan. as needed, and then share the results. So we're going to look at some information about collaboration. The collaboration involves relationships that have a shared vision, and that you're sharing the leadership and the decision making to move forward with whatever this project is that you're collaborating on. And this is a very important aspect of, we collaborate a lot as school counselors. In looking at interpersonal collaboration, this is a style for direct interaction between at least two co-equal parties voluntarily engaged in shared decision making as they work toward a common goal. So there's two words in there that are pretty key, and that's co-equal. That whether, if you look at the hierarchy of your school, whether you really are on the same level or not, that in this project you are on the same level, and that it's voluntary. It's kind of hard to collaborate with somebody who's being forced to do it. And so here's the characteristics of it: that it is voluntary, that there's parity, there's that equal footing. You have mutual goals. You share the responsibility for participating and decision making. You share resources that you have with one another, and you share accountability for the outcomes. So if it goes well, everybody involved gets the glory. If it doesn't go well, everybody involved accepts part of the responsibility for that. Effective collaborators value the process. They trust other people and are able to give up a sense of control. They recognize that others bring things to the table that maybe they don't have, and that they get this sense of community and of building relationships within the process. So these are the components of a productive team process: that you share the leadership responsibilities. And even though you're sharing it, that somebody's leading the charge. Now, you can do that in a way that people don't always recognize that is, and that they still feel some leadership in it. But ultimately, somebody's got to step up to be the one that is either delegating things or keeping things together. That you have well-defined and understood purpose for what you're working toward. That you have an effective way to measure your success or lack of. That all members and the group are held accountable. That you're given time for the interaction. In the school, this is hard, because so often teachers are asked to, give up, to come in early, to stay late, to give up their planning period. But if you really are working on big changes, you need to allow people time during the workday to do that. And if that means, covering classes for one another, getting some substitutes in, but that you make time when they're not rushed because they have to start their day or tired at the end of the day. That you celebrate individual and group success along the way. That you're paying attention to the content and the process of what you're doing. And this should say monitored, not monitors. That there's clear ground rules for the work that you're to do. And that you have reasonable and attainable goals. And you're continually processing if you're being effective and how you can improve. So the other idea is this idea of consultation. And consultation is a key role for counselors in the school. That's when you're working with somebody or a group to help them achieve a goal of creating some type of change in someone else or within a system. You have a systems orientation to it. That you help this group to conceptualize the problem in context of the bigger picture, and that you use a problem-solving model for addressing that. These are some of the relationship-building attitudes and behaviors that support this type of work. That you have the ability to align and mobilize people. That this sense of concert building. So think about this like a symphony, that you're bringing together all these different parts to create a beautiful project in the end, but that every part is unique and different, and that they bring something unique and different to the table but each piece is necessary for the final outcome. You have the ability to inspire others to do the work, that people have a sense of satisfying higher level needs, that as the leader you give emotional support and encouragement, you're promoting principles and values, and being a servant leader along the way, and leading the charge, and leading by being a role model, and being to work alongside people in it. So that's the information on leadership. Before class, I want you to read, this says school counselor advocacy um, articles, but there's several articles there that I want you to read. And I want you to read all of them. And we'll cover this over the next 2 weeks. So next week you won't have anything to listen to. You won't have a lecture part. So this week in class, we're going to do your research proposals first, and then we'll begin looking at some of this information, and then we'll finish up in the next week. Okay, that is the end of the lecture.